In the heart of America, in the sprawling, unassuming city of Omaha, Nebraska, a modern ghost story was about to unfold. It wouldn't be a tale of spectral apparitions or haunted houses, but of a phantom living in the machine. A ghost made of data and electricity, of text messages and emails that would torment a man for years and hide a chilling, deadly secret. For Dave Krupa, the nightmare began with a simple notification, a buzz from the phone in his pocket. It was a message from a woman he'd only been seeing for a couple of weeks, Carrie Farver. But the message was strange, out of character, and it was just the first drop in what would become a digital deluge of obsession, terror, and deceit. This is a story about a murder that was so cunningly concealed, the victim was blamed for the crime for years after her death. It's a story of how a killer wore her victim's identity like a mask, crafting a perfect, horrifying deception. If you want to hear more true crime stories, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. To understand the tragedy of Carrie Farver's end, you must first understand the life she lived. Go about an hour's drive east from the bustle of Omaha, cross the Missouri River, and you'll find yourself in the quiet, rolling hills of rural Iowa. Here lies the small town of Macedonia, a place defined by its grain elevators, its single main street, and a profound sense of community. It was here, surrounded by the vast open skies and the scent of cornfields baking in the summer sun, that Carrie Leah Farver built her world. She was a woman grounded in the rhythms of this small town life, a dedicated, fiercely loving single mother to her teenage son, Max. Her life wasn't one of grand ambitions, but of profound, everyday purpose. She was a computer programmer, a job that spoke to her sharp, logical mind, but her true focus was always Max. Their home was filled with the easy comfort of a deep bond, the sound of video games from Max's room, the smell of dinner cooking on the stove, the shared jokes and knowing glances. Carrie was the kind of mother who knew not just her son's friends, but their parents, their schedules, their stories. She was a constant, steady presence in a world that can feel anything but. Her friends and family knew her as the reliable one, the one you could call at 3 in the morning without a second thought. She had a laugh that was infectious, a straightforwardness that was refreshing, and a deep-seated kindness that she extended to everyone she met. In 2012, at 37 years old, with Max growing more independent, Carrie was cautiously stepping into a new phase of her own life, dipping a toe back into the world of dating, looking not for a whirlwind romance, but for a simple, honest connection. Across the river in Omaha, Dave Krupa was also starting over. He was a man in his late 30s, a skilled auto mechanic who found a simple satisfaction in the hum of a well-tuned engine. The air in his shop was a familiar cocktail of gasoline, oil, and worn metal, a scent that for him meant purpose and stability. He had recently ended a long-term relationship with the mother of his 2 children, Amy, and had moved to Omaha to be closer to them. He wasn't looking for anything serious. Life had taught him to be cautious with his heart. His world was one of routine, the clatter of tools on the concrete floor of the garage, the grease under his fingernails that never quite washed away, and the evenings spent in his simple bachelor apartment, the quiet hum of the television, a constant companion. He was navigating the unfamiliar landscape of modern dating, creating a profile on an online site, hoping for a connection that was easy, uncomplicated. He was a good man, a good father, a man who believed in doing the right thing. He had no idea that his search for a casual connection was about to place him at the epicenter of a dark and twisted obsession. It was through this digital doorway that Shanna Liz Goliar first entered Dave Krupa's life. Her profile was bright, energetic, She was a single mother, an animal lover, and she projected an aura of fun and spontaneity. Their first few dates were just what Dave had been looking for. They were easy. They shared a love for motorcycles and the same kind of rock music. The conversation flowed without effort. Liz seemed to understand his desire to keep things casual. She had her own life, her own kids, and she never seemed demanding or clingy. Dave's apartment began to feel a little less empty. He and Liz would share takeout on the couch, watch movies, and talk for hours. It was a comfortable arrangement, a soft place to land in the uncertain world of being newly single. There were no red flags, no warning signs, nothing to suggest the terrifying darkness that lurked just beneath her smiling, easygoing surface. For Dave, Liz Golia was simply a nice woman he was casually seeing. He could never have imagined the possessive, all-consuming jealousy that was quietly taking root in her mind. A few weeks later, a different kind of connection sparked, not online, but in the familiar, grease-scented air of Dave's auto shop. A Ford Explorer pulled in for service, and the woman who stepped out was Kari Farver. There was an immediate, easy chemistry between them. Kari's smile was genuine, her eyes sparkled with intelligence and a hint of wry humor. They talked and laughed as Dave worked on her car, the professional barrier quickly dissolving into a comfortable, flirty rapport. He found her incredibly attractive, not just for her looks, but for the confident, down-to-earth way she carried herself. When he later saw her profile on the same dating site he used, it felt like fate. He reached out, and she responded immediately. Their first date was even better than their first meeting. The connection was real, palpable. Kari was direct, honest about what she wanted. Like Dave, she wasn't looking for a marriage proposal. She wanted companionship, fun, and honesty. As she sat across from him, her voice a warm and steady presence, Dave felt a sense of relief, a feeling that he'd hit the jackpot. This was it. This was the uncomplicated connection he'd been hoping for. On the night of November 12, 2012, Kari Farver drove her Ford Explorer from her quiet life in Macedonia to Dave Krupa's apartment in Omaha. The air was crisp with the chill of late autumn. Inside, the apartment was warm, a small haven from the world. They talked, they laughed, and the easy chemistry they shared deepened into something more intimate. It felt natural, unforced. For the first time in a long while, Dave felt a sense of genuine, uncomplicated happiness. But as the night wore on, the quiet peace was shattered by a knock at the door. It was Liz Golia. She was unannounced, claiming she needed to pick up some of her things. The air in the small apartment suddenly turned thick and cold. An awkward, tense silence fell as Dave tried to explain the situation. Kari, sensing the sudden shift, decided to leave. As she walked out of the apartment and down the narrow hallway, her path crossed with Liz Golia's. It was a fleeting moment, a passing glance between two women who were, for that brief instant, rivals in a love triangle neither of them had fully signed up for. They made eye contact for no more than 3 seconds. 3 seconds of charged silence. There were no words exchanged, just a silent acknowledgement of an uncomfortable truth. Then, Kari was gone, her footsteps fading down the stairs, leaving behind a lingering tension that neither Dave nor Liz could have possibly understood the true, terrifying meaning of. The next morning, November 13th, felt normal. The lingering awkwardness from the night before seemed to have dissipated with the morning light. Kari had stayed the night. She got ready for work from Dave's apartment, the scent of her perfume mingling with the familiar smell of coffee. They kissed goodbye, making plans to see each other again that evening. It was a simple, hopeful farewell. Dave left for his garage, the satisfying rumble of his own engine a familiar start to his day. He left Kari in his apartment, trusting her to lock up when she left. He spent his morning with his mind on his work. The satisfying logic of engines and mechanics a welcome distraction. But a few hours later, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Carrie. Dave smiled, expecting a sweet message, a confirmation of their plans. But when he read the words on the screen, a knot of confusion tightened in his stomach. The message was jarring, completely out of the blue. "I think we should move in together," it read. Dave was stunned. It made no sense. They had only been on a few dates. They had both explicitly agreed to keep things casual. He texted back, gently reminding her of their conversation, trying to clear up what had to be a misunderstanding. The response came almost immediately. It was angry, accusatory. "Fine, I don't ever want to see you again. Go away." And then another and another. "I hate you. You've ruined my life." The messages were vicious, irrational, and they kept coming. Dave stared at his phone, the cold, blue light of the screen illuminating his bewildered face. This wasn't the Carrie he knew. This wasn't the calm, rational, funny woman he had been so drawn to. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. The initial barrage of texts was just the beginning. In the days and weeks that followed, Dave Krupa's phone became a weapon turned against him. It was a constant source of anxiety, a portal through which an unseen tormentor could reach him at any moment. The messages came from Kari Farber's number, but the voice behind them was a venomous stranger. There were dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of texts and emails. They ranged from declarations of love to vicious insults and terrifying threats. "I will destroy you," one message read. Another said, "I am watching you." The ghost in the machine knew his schedule. It knew when he was at work, when he was home, and, most chillingly, it knew when he was with Liz Goliar. The messages would often reference Liz, calling her a whore and threatening her with violence. Dave was living in a state of constant, heightened alert. Every ping from his phone sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He started to see shadows in his peripheral vision, to check the locks on his doors and windows obsessively. He felt like he was being hunted. He went to the police, showed them the messages, but with no physical threat, and the messages coming from Kari's known number, there was little they could do. He was trapped in a digital nightmare, haunted by a woman he barely knew, who had seemingly transformed overnight into a relentless, terrifying stalker. While Dave was being inundated with digital hate, a different kind of nightmare was unfolding for Nancy Rainey, Carrie's mother, back in Macedonia. A few days after Carrie's last visit to Omaha, Nancy received a text from her daughter's phone. It was short, dismissive. Carrie said she was quitting her job and moving to Kansas for a new opportunity. She said she'd be in touch later to arrange for Max to join her. The message felt cold, impersonal, and deeply wrong. Nancy's heart clenched with a mother's intuition, a primal sense of dread that settled deep in her bones. This wasn't her daughter. Carrie would never, ever leave her son. She would never abandon her job and her life with a curt, emotionless text message. She would never miss her father's funeral, or her son's birthday, or Thanksgiving, all of which passed with only more strange, detached texts as an explanation. Nancy called Kari's phone again and again, but it always went straight to voicemail. She sent frantic texts, pleading for her daughter to call her, to just let her hear her voice. But the only replies were more of the same cold, stilted words, claiming she was busy, that she needed space. Nancy went to the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office and filed a missing person report. She told the deputies about the strange texts, her voice trembling as she insisted, "This is not my daughter." But the digital trail was convincing. To law enforcement, it looked like a woman who had voluntarily left her life behind. But Nancy knew In the quiet of her home, surrounded by photos of her smiling, vibrant daughter, Nancy Rainey knew that something terrible had happened. As the months dragged on, the digital harassment campaign escalated, and a new, disturbing narrative began to take shape. Liz Goliar, the other woman in the brief love triangle, was now also a target. She started receiving the same hateful messages that Dave was getting, all supposedly from Kari. She would show them to Dave, her eyes wide with fear, positioning herself as a fellow victim, a woman terrorized by a jealous rival. This shared trauma brought them closer. Dave felt a sense of responsibility, of guilt. He felt he had brought this chaos into Liz's life. He wanted to protect her. But the attacks on Liz weren't just digital. Her car was keyed, her garage was vandalized with spray-painted slurs. And then came the fire. In August 2013, Liz Goliar's house burned to the ground. She escaped, but her beloved pets, 2 dogs, a cat, and a snake, all perished in the blaze. An email sent from an account in Carey's name arrived shortly after, claiming responsibility for the arson. To the world, and especially to Dave, this was the ultimate proof of Kari's dangerous obsession. She was no longer just a stalker, she was violent, vindictive, and escalating. Liz played the part of the terrified victim perfectly. She leaned on Dave for support, her apparent suffering only cementing her innocence in his mind. She was the real victim, he thought. They were in this together. It was a masterful performance, a calculated act of deception designed to hide an unthinkable truth. The real victim was the one being blamed for it all. For nearly 3 years, the official investigation into Kari Farver's disappearance remained stagnant. The digital evidence was overwhelming, and it all pointed to one conclusion. Kari Farver was alive and was a deeply disturbed stalker. The police in Omaha and Pottawatomie County had thousands of messages. They had the apparent confession to arson. They had the testimony of 2 terrified victims, Dave Krupa and Liz Goliar. The case seemed, if not closed, then at least explained. Kari's car was eventually found in January 2013, parked in a lot not far from Dave's apartment. A search of the vehicle yielded very little. A single, unidentified fingerprint on a mint container was collected, but with no body and no physical evidence of a crime, it was just another dead end. Kari Farver became a ghost in the system, a missing person who wasn't really missing. Her family's pleas, her mother's certainty that the digital phantom was not her daughter, were drowned out by the sheer volume of the electronic illusion. The investigation was lost in a digital fog, a complex web of lies so meticulously crafted that it had completely obscured the horrifying truth of what had really happened on November 13, 2012. In the spring of 2015, the cold case file of Kari Farver landed on the desk of Sergeant Jim Doty of the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office. He, along with Deputy Ryan Avis, decided to take a fresh look at the puzzle. Something about the case just didn't sit right. It was too neat, yet too bizarre. Adults, especially devoted mothers like Kari Farver, didn't just vanish and spend years harassing people without leaving some kind of real-world trace. There were no financial records, no sightings, no phone calls where anyone actually heard her voice. There was only the endless stream of digital messages. Doty and Avis made a crucial decision. They would split the investigation into 2 parallel tracks. Avis would work under the assumption that Kari was still alive, hunting for any proof of life, any tangible evidence that she was out there somewhere. Doty would pursue the darker path. He would work the case as if Kari Farver had been murdered on the day she disappeared. It was this dual approach that would ultimately crack the case wide open. They began to re-examine every piece of evidence, every interview, every digital breadcrumb, and as they did, they started to notice a recurring and suspicious name in almost every report: Liz Golyar. She was always at the center of the drama, always the victim, always the one with new evidence of Kari's harassment. To the seasoned detectives, it started to feel less like a coincidence and more like a carefully orchestrated performance. Doty and Avis knew that the key to unlocking this case lay buried in the mountain of digital data. They needed a specialist, someone who could see through the electronic smoke and mirrors. They brought in Anthony Carver, a digital forensics expert. Carver's job was to deconstruct the digital ghost, to trace the phantom messages back to their source. He began by analyzing the contents of Dave Krupa's and Liz Golyar's phones, which had been downloaded years earlier. Immediately, Carver started finding inconsistencies, anomalies that the original investigators had missed. He found that Liz had set up dozens of fake email accounts in variations of Kari's name. He discovered she was using special apps that could schedule texts and emails to be sent at a later time, a feature that explained how both she and Dave could receive a threatening message from Kari while they were sitting on the couch together. Carver traced the IP addresses from some of the most threatening emails. One of them pinged back to a location right next to Liz Golyar's own home. The digital walls that Liz had so carefully constructed around her lies were beginning to crumble. The ghost in the machine was starting to look less like Kari Farver and a lot more like Liz Golyar. As Carver dug deeper into the digital evidence, the cracks in Liz Golyar's story turned into gaping holes. He made a stunning discovery on her phone, a photo of Kari Farver's Ford Explorer. The photo's metadata, the digital fingerprint embedded in the image file, revealed that it had been taken a full month before the car was officially found by police. There was no innocent explanation for this. It was proof that Liz knew the location of the car long before she claimed to. The detectives also re-examined the single fingerprint that had been found on the mint container inside Kari's car years ago. With Liz now their primary suspect, they compared it to her prints. It was a perfect match. The web of deception was unraveling fast. Liz, sensing the investigators closing in, made a final desperate gambit. She reported that she had been shot in the leg while walking in a park. She claimed the shooter was Dave Krupa's ex, Amy Flora, the mother of his children, who she now insisted was the real stalker, impersonating Kari all along. It was a wild, baseless accusation, and it was the final nail in her coffin. Investigators quickly confirmed Amy Flora had an airtight alibi. They knew Liz had shot herself in a last-ditch effort to frame an innocent woman and throw them off her trail. Her lies had finally caught up with her. The investigators now had a mountain of circumstantial evidence, but they still lacked the one thing that would guarantee a murder conviction: Kari Farver's body. They needed definitive proof that she was dead. That proof came from an old tablet computer that Dave Krupa had given to the police. The device had been used by Liz Golyar during the time Kari disappeared. Tony Carver meticulously went through the device's memory, searching for anything that might have been deleted. And then he found it. Buried deep within the deleted files was a single, horrifying image. It was a close-up photo of a human foot. The foot was clearly deceased, showing signs of decomposition. And on the top of the foot was a distinctive tattoo, a Chinese symbol. The detectives immediately contacted Nancy Rainey and asked her a question they already knew the answer to. Did Kari have any tattoos? Nancy's voice, thick with emotion, confirmed their suspicions. Her daughter had a tattoo of the Chinese symbol for mother on her foot. It was the smoking gun. It was the grisly, heartbreaking proof that Kari Farver was not a stalker, but a victim of a brutal murder. The digital ghost had finally been exorcised, revealing the face of the killer who had been hiding behind it all along. In December of 2016, more than 4 years after Carrie Farver was last seen alive, Liz Golyar was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The trial was a bench trial with a judge, not a jury, deciding her fate. The prosecution laid out the complex, sprawling case piece by piece. They presented the mountain of digital evidence, the thousands of texts, the scheduled messages, the spoofed IP addresses. They presented the fingerprint from the mint container, the photo of the car, and finally, the gruesome photo of Kari's tattooed foot. They painted a picture of a jealous, obsessive woman who, after a chance 3-second encounter in a hallway, decided to eliminate her rival and then engage in a years-long campaign of terror and deception to cover her tracks. Liz Golyar maintained her innocence, her defense arguing that without a body or a murder weapon, there was no proof of a murder. But the digital evidence was too overwhelming, the lies too numerous. On August 15, 2017, the judge found Shanna Liz Golyar guilty of first-degree murder and second-degree arson. She was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Justice had been served, but it couldn't bring Kari back. The conviction of Liz Golyar brought an end to a years-long nightmare, but for those whose lives were shattered by her deception, the scars remain. Dave Krupa was left to grapple with the profound guilt of his unwitting role in the tragedy and the psychological trauma of being stalked by a woman who was already dead. Kari Farver's family, especially her son Max and her mother Nancy, were finally able to clear her name. The world now knew the truth. Kari was not a monster, but the victim of a monstrous act. Her reputation was restored, but their loss is immeasurable. Kari Farver's body has never been found, denying her family the closure of a proper burial. She remains a ghost in some ways, her final resting place, a secret that Liz Golyar has taken with her to prison. The case stands as a chilling testament to the dark side of modern connection, a reminder that behind the screens and profiles, real, and sometimes deadly, human emotions are at play. It is a story not just of a crime, but of a stolen identity, a mother's love, and a digital deception so perfect it almost allowed a killer to get away with murder.